Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Welcome to providing rape crisis services to survivors in New York County jails. My name is E. I'm NISCASA's PREA Outreach Director. NISCASA stands for the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We're glad to be here with you today. NISCASA's values. As part of our missions and values, we like to start by acknowledging that we're on Indigenous land and that where I'm coming from today is on Haudenosaunee and Mohican lands. It's also known as Albany, New York. Feel free to use the link in the chat here to look up who the original caretakers of the land are, where you've come from. As part of NISCASA's mission to end all forms of sexual violence and exploitation, we also have to address the impacts of sexual assault. NISCASA believes that sexual violence is a human rights violation. All people and all communities are affected by sexual violence. Sexual violence is rooted in systemic oppressions that shape our society, including and by no means limited to white supremacy, racism, ableism, sexism, and homophobia. We also believe that access to support, advocacy, and medical care in the aftermath of sexual violence is similarly impacted by systemic oppression. And in order to address sexual violence, we must create a culture that actively fights for equity and opposes oppression in all its forms. And today, we're glad to be joined by guest presenter, Matthew Van Winkle.
Thank you, E, and welcome everyone. My name is Matthew Van Winkle. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a senior program officer with Just Detention International. JDI's mission, we are a health and human rights organization that seeks to end sexual abuse in all forms of detention. Some of you may already have interacted with us somehow with trainings and TA opportunities that were offered in your area. And I'm very, very pleased to be kind of co-presenting and a guest of NISCASA today. It's JDI's core principle that when the government takes away someone's freedom, the government assumes the absolute responsibility to protect that person's safety, and that no matter what crime a person may have committed, rape is not part of the penalty. Our time today is supported by the generous support of the Office on Violence Against Women, and the opinions and recommendations expressed here today are those of those you'll hear speaking. We are not reflecting the views necessarily of the U.S. Department of Justice. So today we'll be providing an overview of jails and who is held in them and how they vary from prisons, which many of you are probably already providing services at your NISDOCS facilities if you have them. And then we'll welcome two advocates, Yana and Clarissa from the Westchester Community Opportunity Program, and have sort of an in-depth conversation with them about how they have begun partnering with their local jail. We'll be providing tips on ways to adjust your services for the unique jail settings. And of course, we will have time for questions at the end. We do encourage you to please practice self-care during this webinar. Take deep breaths, step out as needed, stand up and stretch, whatever helps you feel whole and yourself and how you want to be in your body. We support it. So we wanted to kind of begin with a little icebreaker question. Or questions, a pair of questions. What county are you joining us from, and how long have you been working with incarcerated survivors? So if you can use the chat feature, I think we'll be able to get everyone's, thank you, Chell. Oh, wow, fellow Californian, San Francisco County, California, and about a month. Good to have you with us. See Onondaga County, if I hope I'm saying that correctly, I may not be, and a few months into working with incarcerated survivors. New Britain, Connecticut, 6 months. Seven Dancers Coalition in Niagara County, just starting out. Well, welcome. Nenny, good to be with you again. New York, New York, a few months in. Welcome. And Jefferson County, New York, 4 years. Well, that's wonderful. Welcome, Shane. Well, I hope everyone who wanted to engage in the icebreaker has had the opportunity to do so, and that there aren't any problems with the with anyone accessing the chat feature. I see Marsha Williams Young, New York, have not worked with the survivor as yet that has been incarcerated, but maybe you've done some forensic accompaniment, if I'm reading you right. Great. All right, well, please do feel free to keep using this chat as we go through, and we'll get started with our first section, Jails in Focus. There are currently about 15,000 people in jails in New York State. Before we dive deep into the services that you can provide to survivors within your local jail, we want to review what a jail is. Now, I know that can sound pretty basic, but popular media and kind of your average person on the street can sometimes use the term jail and prison interchangeably. It's really important to understand how a jail is different from other forms of detention and how the needs of the survivors held in jails may change because of these differences. And also, when you're partnering with staff at jails or prisons, you really want to make sure you're using the right terminology, not out of any sense of respect, not in the same way that we want to make sure we use the correct pronouns for someone, but so that we are appearing knowledgeable about their facility so that they can take us seriously and feel like we have a handle on what they are, what they do. So it's self-serving. Now, this infographic here, it was created by the Prison Policy Initiative. It's just a few years old. It has a lot to tell us. One of the key things we want to understand is the vast number of people the jails hold and why they're being held there. The Prison Policy Initiative is a fantastic resource in helping us understand mass incarceration. It does a wonderful job kind of translating some very, very complicated, very dense data for people like me, I'll be frank. So jails are typically smaller facilities than prisons, but jails hold 1 out of every 3 of the people held in custody in this country. One of the biggest misconceptions about the jail system is why people are there. The vast majority of people held in jails are not yet convicted. This means that no trial or judge has stated that that individual committed a crime, but that the person is put in jail as they wait for their case to move forward. as they were either not offered bail as an option, or in most cases, they simply cannot afford the bail amount. And here are some key distinctions to be aware of that can help us message appropriately when speaking about prisons versus jails. Jails are run by local county sheriff's departments, typically. And this is different from the prison system, which is run either by the state government, which in New York State is NISDOCS, or the federal government, FCI or BOP, Bureau of Prisons Facilities. While the oversight for jails and prisons alike is unfortunately not as stringent as it should be, it's way too limited, we do generally see that a state prison system or the federal prison system is often covered more widely by the press. So there can be a little bit more of like their behavior in a spotlight. It makes more news, for example, when there's corruption or mistreatment or abuse going on there. Jails sometimes get a pass because there's not as much widespread focus on them. As we said earlier, prisons hold people who have been convicted of a crime, whereas the majority of people in a jail system have not been convicted of a crime. This is partially why the length of stay for someone tends to be a little shorter in the jail system than in the prison system. Again, I'm using that only as a general rule. There are cases certainly of people spending multiple years in jails. I know certainly here in Los Angeles County, that's the case. So I'm certainly not trying to speak for everyone, just trying to make some broad generalization strokes to kind of help us understand the differences between these two types of carceral settings. But people tend to be in jail for less than a year and in prisons for more than 1 year. And of course, we do see that sometimes people will enter and re-enter the jail system frequently. So it can be a little bit of a revolving door once they're on the radar of the county and probation. So lack of programming is a real problem in jails where there's very, very little. Whereas in prisons, which tend to be more stable environments where people are there for longer terms, there can be sometimes some offered either professional training or groups about relationships or meditation or art classes and things like that. So generally, jails are sort of designed as places for people to be in and out of quickly, which is why things are set up in a much less permanent way than prison facilities. This is everything from how the beds and cells are set up to that lack of programming I just mentioned, and the lack of, the fact that they're doing kind of so little for the folks in jails is kind of geared with the idea that they're going to be there for, not very much time. So it's a little bit, very light touches and nothing extra is done. But this means we need to think about how we can alter our services or your services as advocates to meet the needs of people who we may only work with for a very short period of time. And being aware that people in jails are coming directly from the community. They may be coming down from drug and alcohol dependence. They may also have more acute mental health needs. They may not be stabilized with clinicians or medications. We know that bail reform was a big, big story in New York State, and that it passed in 2019, and that decreased the overall population in New York jails. However, it's interesting and important to note that the average length of time now spent in jail custody there has gone up since bail reform passed to between 50 and 100 days in 2019 and 2020, as reported by the Vera Institute. And although jail populations fell, counties were holding people much longer than they were pre-COVID-19, which was a big, obviously we all experienced that, and we all saw the headlines coming out of detention centers last year. Completely unacceptable, completely horrific. And a lot of services to advocates were just put on ice. Jail and prison staff alike were really not making much time for transporting folks for forensic exams, certainly not allowing in-person services. And then of course the people held in custody were more reluctant to use the telephones to reach out because they were afraid of getting sick. So we want to make sure that this is just to say that as counties began to kind of decarcerate to protect people inside and prevent virus spread outside, the people left inside during COVID-19 really languished in dangerous conditions for months. In the counties the Vera Institute sampled outside of New York City, the average length of stay more than doubled, from 52 days in June of 2019 to 113 days in June of 2020. Meanwhile, in New York City, the average length of stay increased by almost 70%, from 102 days in June 2019 to 172 days in June of 2020. And Caitlin, I'm sorry for all these numbers. I'm sure you're doing a great job. Outside of New York City, the average length of stay increased from 52 days in June of 2019 to 113 days in June of 2020. So one of the main places where there is some overlap between jails and prisons is that both the jail and all jail and all prisons in the United States have to comply with the PREA standards. That is, of course, the Prison Rape Elimination Act standards. We say PREA for short. These standards were created to apply to both jail and prison settings, and they are mandated to be implemented fully. That means they can't just choose which standards they comply with. They are required to comply with all 52. Unfortunately, what we have found is that many local jails have not started really focusing on PREA in the same way that some state prison systems have. This may be because most jails have fewer inmates and are able to have a lower profile than prisons and receive less media scrutiny, as I glanced at before. Whereas most state facilities have undergone a PREA audit at least once, the same cannot be said for many county jails. And sometimes without an impending PREA audit over them, we found that some sheriff's departments are really lagging behind in implementing the PREA standards at their facility, including reaching out to you all, establishing MOUs for the provision of emotional support services to incarcerated survivors in their care. However, they really should and need to be reminded that they should be working towards creating a culture of sexual safety in their facilities, and they should be partnering with you all to help accomplish that. Now we're going to see a very brief video here of Frank. Frank is a survivor of prisoner rape while held in a Los Angeles County jail. I want to caution Frank's story may be difficult to hear. It's very apparent from the video, the trauma that he suffered. Again, we remind you to take care of yourselves today and do what you need to do. I will load up the video here. And here's Frank Mendoza, survivor of prisoner rape.
In the year 2006, I was arrested for public drunkenness and ended up at LA County Jail, where it was the first time ever being arrested, and I was terrified. I remembered, this one incident where this cop made a comment. He said that we all walk like girls. And I said to the person next to me, oh, a man unsure of his masculinity. And obviously the cop heard, he rushed me, pinned me up against the wall, threatened me, said he was going to show me his masculinity. A few days later, the same man that threatened me actually came into my cell. And of course, he came in and manhandled me, threw me on the ground, stripped me naked, assaulted me sexually. total humiliation. As a survivor, with the PREA standards being passed, it's good to know that there's going to be a protocol in these kind of situations. With me, there was no forensic evidence taken, no DNA tests, nothing. And with these standards being finalized, it's going to be different. Under the PREA standards, the staff will be educated and hopefully learn how to treat the transgender community. They actually were more vulnerable than myself. And I saw that and witnessed that firsthand.
All right. So there was a lot, even that brief video. Does anyone have sort of a reaction that they wanted to share? Was there anything that Frank said that may have resonated with you very powerfully, or anything he said that surprised you? And that's fine if there was really nothing that folks want to share. We just always want to make sure that we're trying to center and put the focus on those who have lived this experience directly. If anything comes up from folks later, just feel free to put it in the chat. So another factor to be aware of when you're beginning to work with survivors in jails is that there is an overrepresentation in jails of people with mental health challenges. Whereas 1 in every 17 people in the community have a serious mental illness, 1 in 4 people incarcerated in jails reported experiences that met the threshold for serious psychological distress. This makes people in jail 6 times more likely to experience serious psychological distress than people with no criminal justice involvement in the past year. Just something to be aware of as you're kind of beginning to engage, that there is going to be some more pre-existing trauma and maybe some underlying mental challenges. So now we want to talk a little bit about what we can do to begin or expand rape crisis services in the jail setting. And we're going to be hearing directly from a program that has done a very good job of partnering with their local county jail. 2 advocates from Westchester Community Opportunity Program. They are Clarissa and Yana. And do we have you both?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us today.
Yes, thank you for being.
Hi, everyone. This is Yana. Thanks for having us.
Welcome. And I'm sorry to talk over you there. I'm going to start my video, and then we can have a little bit of what will, I guess, be, conversation like that. So I'm going to stop this share, and I think that will mean that folks are now seeing our faces and not the slide anymore. Welcome and good to be with you. So I guess Clarissa, would you like to kind of introduce just Westchester Community Opportunities Program and yourself and your role there? And then Yana, would you do the same?
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Clarissa Espinosa, as Matthew introduced me. I am the Assistant Director of Programs at WestCOP Victims Assistance Services. WestCOP is a larger agency that provides multiple services in Westchester County and nearby counties in New York. We do it all. We have veterans programs. We have our grandparent fostering program. We do other programs with childcare, and then we have victims assistance services, which is one of the smaller programs at WestCOP. And we provide free and confidential services to all victims of all crimes. And we specialize in providing these particular services to marginalized communities, such as people who are incarcerated.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yana Colon. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a PREA advocate here at Westcott Victim Assistance Services. I've been providing services to incarcerated survivors of sexual violence for about 2.5 years now. I provide services at 5 state facilities and at the local county jail.
Great. So you mentioned, is it just the one? Is it the one facility that you have in county? Is it just one jail?
Yes. So far, all we do is cover the Westchester County Jail in Valhalla, but we do cover the 5 state facilities.
Okay, right. So you have sort of a background in kind of serving folks who are not free. And how did, I guess, maybe we can kind of go back to the beginning of the partnership, and how did that get off the ground? Was that something that you all had to initiate, or did they come to you? What was happening? How did this kind of get started?
So we've actually worked with our county jail for multiple years. We started back in 1999 as a volunteer program. For those who are not familiar, there's a Resolve to Stop the Violence program that's very popular, and they work with victims of crime who then go and talk to individuals who are incarcerated about the impact on the crimes that they've committed. And so back in 1999, we worked with them. We continue to work with them still to this very day, but we never made the connection of providing PREA services. Even when in 2015, when we started the pilot program with the New York State docks and other rape crisis centers in New York State, we never made the connection of, hey, they are people there that might need the same services that state facilities are asking us to provide. So we really didn't make the connections until later on in 2015, towards the end of the year. Part of our conversations with other rape crisis centers were, how can we expand what we're currently building on this pilot program? And so there was a topic of expanding to local county jails. So we made an initial contact, we never heard back, and we didn't really pursue it much after that. And it wasn't in 2017 that the Westchester County Jail reached out to us because they were undergoing a PREA audit. And so I believe they wanted to learn a little bit more about what we did, how can they potentially collaborate with us, and how we can provide services for them. So the conversation literally lasted 2 years. It was a lot of back and forth. It was a lot of, missed meetings here and there. And finally in 2019, we made it part of our strategic plan and expansion to really get connected to them and really kind of brainstorm how we can actually collaborate. So Yana and myself met with some of the people that we have been connected through our Resolve to Stop the Violence program. And we had really good rapport with New York State docs, who had also been somebody they reached out for clarification on PREA services. So Jason Effman, the associate for PREA services on New York State docs, had put a good word about us and the services that we provide. And it all kind of just flew naturally after that. They were very invested. We didn't have to sell anything to them in terms of what we provided. They were kind of wanting to just learn more about what we did and how they can implement our services in their establishment.
Wow. Okay. There's a lot there. First of all, I was struck by the fact that you were offering services way before PREA was even signed into law in 1999. So I want to just shine some light there, and that's really wonderful and tremendous. Getting it sort of kind of codified with an MOU, I can see took quite a lot longer. If we want to round up, it's almost 20 years, 2017, 2019, from when you started kind of having the jail on your radar. And you mentioned that once you started kind of reaching out in 2015, it was a little bit of an uphill battle where there were missed meetings, meetings that Westcott was showing up for, and you were, showing up, and the folks were not keeping the meeting time. It wasn't a priority for them. And then they finally kind of reached out when they were feeling the heat of an upcoming audit, which I'm going to say is not altogether unusual. Sometimes that really is what gets things moving. From my own perspective, and I don't speak from JDI, I don't really care what gets them moving as long as they do begin to engage and partner. Like, you can be doing it for completely selfish interests. You can be doing it for the most altruistic interests. We'll meet with you. We'll talk with you. We'll get that MOU happening, because at the end of the day, this is about serving survivors who need that emotional support, and it's their right under law. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that dynamic. And you mentioned also, and I think I just want to highlight this because I think this is something that others on the webinar might gain from. You were able to use the relationship that you had already established with NISDOCs to your advantage. Really they were kind of your credentials in a way, so that the county at that point, they're like, oh, well, if NISDOCs is supportive of Westcott, then I guess we can walk out that direction as well. Did I interpret that correctly?
Yes, so we didn't really have to, even though we had been doing the RSVP program for multiple years, they didn't connect the dots that we were the same program essentially. And we didn't have to necessarily state to them the work that we have been doing with New York State docs. They already knew. They knew about Yana and myself before we even really introduced ourselves. And a lot of that came from the support from New York State docs, and also supporting them in their auditing process. So what we understood was that there was prior meetings, prior connections, and our name came up, and that's how they were able to outreach to us.
Okay, that's great. So that's yeah. It seems, and again, like, these are institutions where sometimes it seems like, well, the left hand doesn't always know what the right hand is doing. So they already were engaging with you, but maybe like you said, the dots weren't connected. Now, what I guess what is the what all services are you offering? I'm assuming that will include forensic exam accompaniment. Yes. And what about, I guess maybe are you doing any sort of follow-up services after that?
Yeah, so the way that I like to put it is that I like to mirror the services that we do provide at the state facilities. So that includes being a third-party reporting source for the incarcerated folks. They're able to call our helpline and have us submit a report on their behalf to the facility, whether that be through a grievance or through the Special Investigations Unit, which is similar to the OSI, Office of Special Investigations, when it comes to the state facilities. We also offer the crisis intervention, whether that be done through our helpline when incarcerated folks are able to call us directly, or having a mental health counselor call us with the survivor there with them and have us do crisis intervention right there. We also provide advocacy when it comes to reporting. So this is just a liaison or a form of communication between us and the survivor and the investigators, making sure that the facility is aware of the report being submitted and making sure that they are handling it the way that the docs, that the PREA standards call for. We also offer information and referrals, whether that be in the facility or even out in our own community, with the facility being in Westchester County and us being a Westchester County wide agency. We're able to provide referrals back into the community for when they're out and back into their back in society. And we're also able to provide these same referrals and resources in the facility. So if they want to be connected to, let's say, mental health or the right resources in the facility, we're able to make those connections for them. And then, yes, we do provide hospital accompaniment. If someone is being transferred to the hospital for FRE, the facility does call our helpline to let us know, and we will meet the survivor at the hospital.
That's tremendous. And I guess I want to highlight kind of what you said about being able to make those referrals to mental health. That you're able to direct mental health referral to folks that you, to whom obviously they would ask you for that. You don't just, in the course of your conversations with a client or a survivor who's incarcerated, you can then refer them to the mental health staff at the jail.
Yeah, we have a pretty good relationship with the Office of Mental Health in the facility. So we are able to provide that direct contact and direct referral, let them know what's been going on, or if someone just wants to get connected with their counselor, we usually have a pretty good relationship with everyone in that department, so we're able to make those connections.
I think that's tremendous. And I want to cast more light on you. I'm sorry, I hope I'm not blinding you with all the light, but I think it's so impressive that there is that engagement with not just one or two staff members at the jail with whom you meet, and that person is sort of the funnel through which you get all information, but you really have taken a multidisciplinary approach and you really engaged. And I think I want to let folks know on the call, if you're thinking to yourself, oh gosh, that will never happen for us, I don't want you to think that it's expected that would happen overnight. This kind of relationship building does take time. You usually will start with just one point of contact, and then you'll slowly kind of branch out as you kind of establish kind of more professional rapport with the jail, and you have more chances to engage, and that they can, over time, they can see that the services you're providing really are to the benefit of the institution as a whole. I guess regarding hopping back to the mental health, do you ever receive referrals from mental health for kind of the rape crisis emotional support services that I think are distinct from what a therapist offers?
Right, yeah, so it is part of the facility's protocol when they do receive a report of someone being sexually assaulted or experience any kind of sexual violence. It is part of their protocol to call us and give us that referral, obviously with the client's consent.
Right.
Even if the assault happened outside of the facility, maybe it happened before they were incarcerated, it is still part of their protocol to give us a call and just make those connections to make sure that the clients are connected to whether it be us or another agency in our community.
Yeah, I think that's really tremendous. So it's a back and forth. And I wanted to, I guess, just talk more about the, oh, I see we have a question possibly. I will read this question. I did have one question I wanted to ask first, if that's okay. Any staff, part of the PREA standards is that all staff, whether they're, and that includes volunteers, contractors, mental health, medical staff, custody staff, all staff at jails and prisons are are mandated reporters if they have knowledge, suspicion, or information related to instances of sexual abuse and sexual harassment at the facility. Advocates are not mandated reporters, but in the case of WestCOP, they've been able to arrange it so that they can receive reports and submit them. PREA does allow for third parties to make reports, and that can really be anyone. It can be an uncle or a grandparent or a sibling, and it can be an advocate. We sometimes are, we always want to make sure that when advocates are receiving reports and making third-party reports, that doesn't rub up against their confidentiality and that the staff at the jail are not then expecting them to be behaving as mandated reporters in every instance. Yana and Clarissa, has there ever been an instance where the jail has come to you for information that you just weren't able to give them for that because of your confidentiality?
I would say yes. I mean, Yana has a lot of more examples than I do. She does a direct service.
Yeah, definitely. I would say this mostly comes from the mental health unit wanting to ask us direct questions about some of the things that we speak about with our clients and some of the things that they disclose to us. But unfortunately, like we tell them, our services are 100% confidential. So without our client's consent, we are not allowed to provide that information to the facility unless our clients want to, or unless they are homicide or suicidal. That's the only time we break confidentiality. But for the most part, the facility has kind of gotten an understanding that we aren't, unfortunately, not able to provide them with all the information that they may want.
Yeah, and I will add to that, that's been an ongoing conversation piece for us in the last 2 years that we've been providing the services. And I think it came from, I think the fact that we're here right now is because of they have a respect for what we do and we have a respect for what they do. One of the conversations that came out of the many calls that we started getting was that these people were really looking for long-term mental health services. And we're very fortunate to have a clinician on our staff that's 100% funded to provide clinical services, trauma-informed clinical services to people who are incarcerated. And so we wanted to make those connections, and they were very hesitant because, as you had mentioned earlier, Matthew, in your presentation, the jails are really sometimes people who are in transition. They're not there long-term. We really don't know how long they're gonna be there. And so the mental health officers really advocated for us to not even initiate that type of conversation with clients, because we didn't want to open up a traumatic experience for somebody and not giving them the tools necessary for them to really process that, whether they were on a call with their therapist today and then tomorrow they were transferred to a state facility. So that was something that we had to really battle a lot back and forth with. I say battle, but that's probably not the right word. But we had a lot of conversations and meetings where both parties advocated really hard for what we thought was right. But I think after 2 years, we kind of had the common understanding that currently what we have in place is what works best, but the communicating back and forth was essential. And also the confidentiality portion was another added important thing to talk about, because that was something that they really didn't understand at first, but they were able to understand later on.
I will say that just to, validate what you just said, confidentiality is a huge topic for education when it comes to jails and prisons alike. And that's part of why I'm so impressed with your very, very nuanced threading of that needle, where you've set yourself up in a position to be able to, create, submit a third-party report, while at the same time really protecting your agency, your advocates, and your clients against kind of divulging anything that is, not with the client's consent. So that's very strong.
I thought about this question, Matthew, over the weekend. And I think a lot of it had to do that because our county jail was sort of replicating the standards that our New York State facilities were replicating. They were kind of like, oh, if this works for New York docs, then this should work for our county jail. So I think that replication really allowed us to have an easier conversation when it came to confidentiality.
That makes sense. We do have a question from an attendee. How are survivors incarcerated in jails able to contact WestCOP for services and support? Is there a designated phone, for example, or hotline number or address that they can write to?
So we have 3 main forms of communication. Our clients are able to call our helpline directly from their unit phones. Any phone in the facility, they can pick it up, dial #63, and that automatically goes to our helpline to be connected to either us or our volunteers. And then the other form is that they can request a referral from their counselor, just letting them know that they would like to be connected with us, and then the counselor gives us a call and makes that connection. And then the last form of communication is that they can send us a letter. Our contact information, our phone numbers and address, everything is posted all over the facility. So our clients are able to take our address down and send us a letter and request services.
Thank you, Yana. And I think it's so good. And again, I know there may be folks on the presentation right now that are thinking, wow, we're really a long way from having it kind of dialed in like that. And if you are thinking that, I just want to reassure you that it is possible, and it does not happen overnight. It just takes perseverance and time and commitment to doing it. We do find that, you know, it's best to have that kind of pound, very easy to remember pound, I forget, 6'3", what did you say? Pound, pound 6'3" or something like that, or a 777, something that really is accessible from any phone that is in the housing unit, that comes directly to your hotline. And those calls are not, are they recorded or monitored in any way, or is there sort of a question mark around that at all? Has that ever been an issue?
So the calls are not monitored. However, due to security purposes, they are recorded, just like any other phone call when it comes to coming out of the facility, but they are not recorded. They are not monitored. The same way when it comes to our follow-up services, we do it either through legal calls or through legal visits. As advocates, we have attorney privileges in the facility. So when I go into the facility for a legal visit, I'm just seen as a regular lawyer. So I'm able to meet in a private room with our clients. And then when it comes to the legal phone calls, we're able to have a private phone booth where our clients can close the door and have conversations with us. And those are not monitored either. Okay. However, just due to security purposes, they're always going to be recorded for the safety of ours and the safety of our clients, of course.
Understood. And we wonder if, has there ever been sort of an issue? I know in the state of California, we just had sort of a concerning issue in which a call was being actively monitored, and the survivor faced some retribution, and the Rape Crisis Center actually got a call from the facility saying that they found the call to be, quote, inappropriate, because it was not related to sexual assault. It was related to the death of a family member, an intimate family member. So for the facility, they were going to say, well, this is completely inappropriate, whereas that's obviously something that someone would need emotional support kind of working through, and, you know, something that an advocate would be well equipped to kind of validate those feelings. So I just, has there ever been a concern for you that or I guess a better question is, do you alert folks when you get those calls that the call is being recorded so that they can make the choice about what they want to say to you? Because I guess they could be reviewed later.
Yeah, so when speaking to like our other advocates and our volunteers answering the helpline, we always make sure that they ask some basic questions like, are you safe and are you alone? We usually try to let them know that the call is recorded, and usually they are aware of that. So a lot of the times when we do have these helpline calls, they don't always go into details just because they know that it's recorded, and also they are being monitored by other people in there, surrounding them, behind them, near them. So most of the time, the client kind of takes it upon themselves by knowing that it is recorded, and then they give minimal details. And then once I either meet them in person or through a legal phone call, that's when I kind of get full details of what's going on and what they really wanted to speak about.
Yeah. And regarding I think that speaks so much to the circumstances that folks who are in these jails are really finding themselves in, where the reality is they may be in full view of their abuser as they're picking up that telephone. This is not a light choice that someone might be making. Unfortunately, the data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics tells us that one of the biggest predictors of whether someone may be targeted for abuse is whether they've been a victim of past abuse. So someone seeking services is making a real kind of judgment about it's time I need to reach out to someone. So thank you for that. Can I ask you a little bit about the letters? Do you receive many letters, or is it a trickle?
I don't receive too many. I mean, I do get them. Most of the time it's just former clients or current clients just wanting to pass along information quickly. And then sometimes it's someone who just doesn't feel comfortable speaking on the phone and are requesting services, so they may write us. But I'll say most of the time when we do receive letters, it's just current clients or past clients wanting to give us information.
Okay, got it. And then I guess the follow-ups will be kind of where you're able to speak with more detail and more confidentiality.
Yes. When it comes to our mail, it is legal mail, so it's not read by the facility. It is opened by them, but the client is in front of them when it does get opened.
Understood. So it's opened in front of the client, so they can check for contraband, and then it's handed to the client without being read.
Right.
I just want to scroll up. I see a few more good questions.
So Matthew, really quick, I know that you had mentioned earlier about if we ever got in a situation where somebody has monitored a call and reached out to us, we really haven't had that situation happen. But I will say that that's something that was a learning curve for us, the importance of that and the importance of our safety. I think that it is very important in transitioning from a state model to a county model. You'll notice right away that the restrictions are far less than working in a county, in a state level. So it's already going to be an easier transition to provide services. I think the county jails have less restrictions, so there's more ability to kind of brainstorm with your partners about how you can provide the best services. But I will say that for us, the learning curve was understanding and having very clear boundaries with our clients. And I think we probably still struggle with that, because we are very limited in what we actually can do. I know we have mentioned to you all our services, and that's great, but that really doesn't take a long time to be able to provide, right? And so the emotional support, which tends to be the most important for some of our clients, is very important, but it's also very important for advocates to practice that boundary setting from the very beginning. And I know Yana probably has more examples where she has to redirect conversations sometimes in a way that allows the client to also know, like, this is very particular kind of service that I'm being offered, and I cannot cross those lines about talking about other daily things that happen to them, because it then might be misinterpreted if somebody's, on the call.
I think that's important to reference. And I think we want to make sure that that's because when you do have kind of practices in place, kind of lanes, and that you're communicative about those lanes, then you're going to be able to kind of continue to provide the services without being burned out or feeling like we're getting all these calls that are not quite on topic, or just as you might receive a call from the community that is off topic, because I'm sure everyone here has received, or even inappropriate from the community. There can be a range of callers that would reach out. So yes, it's very good to kind of be very businesslike, and if it's not something that that's your mission to help with, then you can just communicate, well, this is what we're here for, and they may be calling to test and see if that's what you're here for. So you may hear back from them, and they may disclose abuse in their history. But yeah, the more you can do that, and I think that the more you can continue to be there for the folks who will really need it down the road, and they will only kind of help you seem more kind of competent, professional, trustworthy to your partners at the jail as well on staff there. I did see a question up here from Kimberly asking, saying they're trying to implement kind of services at their local jail. But she's not sure if the service should be offered on the arrival to the facility or on discharge. Kimberly, I hope this answers your question, but the PREA standards require that they have to be in an MOU relationship with the local rape crisis center, and that when someone is brought into the facility, they have to be given basic PREA education on intake, which includes the fact that the facility has a zero tolerance policy for sexual abuse and sexual harassment. And ideally, their intake materials would also include perhaps your brochure. Do you know, Clarissa and Yana, do you have your brochure as part of the basic intake packet when folks are admitted?
The counselors do have a card with our helpline on it and our contact information. And when they do make those referrals, they do pass those along to the clients.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. And we would say that that's kind of really good practice to have your materials there. So yeah, the services, in other words, really are required to be continuously available, Kimberly. And of course, it's all depending on your agency's capacity as to what you can offer after discharge, whether you are offering things like help with housing or anything like that. It's good to be able to kind of communicate about that as well.
Yeah, I would also say, like, depending on like the type of work that your center is doing, whether you already are working with state facilities, if a client or somebody's going to be discharged into another state facility, then making the connections of what rape crisis center or other victim service provider is already offering service there, so that you can make a soft referral, what we like to call it, and or also, part of the discharge plan is to talk about these other services that are available in the community. That's something that when you're working with the MOU is very important to highlight, like the discharge. So that's actually a really good question, because discharge, we do get a lot of referrals from just that discharge conversation, and we continue to provide services to those people that are released into the community with our community advocates.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of, as the moderator here, I wanted to just make a note of the time. I see we have about 15 minutes left together today, and I know we have a little bit more to present on. But this is, I want to just from my heart, I want to say I think that this conversation is the meat of the training. This is what I want, folks to be able to hear, and I think this is how folks can learn so much just from hearing your experience, Clarissa and Yana. Are you able to kind of hang in there until quarter after, and maybe if there are more questions that come up, we can throw back to us? Does that work?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Definitely, yeah.
I appreciate it. So I'm going to switch back to the slide presentation now, and I want to just, I'll be frank that there's a lot of script that we just won't have time to get to. But the basics that are on the slides are going to be included in some of the handouts that we're going to provide to you today, that will be included in the follow-up email. And I'm not sure if they may be thrown in the chat or not. There are links to them, but you will certainly receive them as part of the follow-up email. We have some toolkits, and we have that will kind of go into some of these topics as well. So I'll switch back here to the PowerPoint. And again, we will just kind of cruise through this. We've already kind of heard Clarissa and Yana talk about how they established some of their partnership with the local jail. Obviously, before you're kind of setting it up, you're going to want to set up your goals. You want to know what you're going to be offering. It should include, we think, at a minimum, accompaniment during forensic exams, accompaniment during investigatory interviews, if possible, toll-free, non-monitored, non-recorded, confidential phone calls. We understand that's not going to be possible in every jurisdiction, just as it is not at WestCOP's local facility. They do record the calls, but they don't monitor them. Again, part of this is going to be down to the strength of your relationship and the trust level between you and the staff there. We also want to ensure confidential written correspondence, perhaps using the legal mail method that Jana and Clarissa talked about. Before you kind of get started, you want to make sure you're assessing your capacity. What are you already providing in the community? What do you feel you can do in addition to that? What kind of training can you provide to your peers on the correctional side of things? What kind of training do you think internally is going to be needed for your staff to serve survivors who are incarcerated? And what resources can you develop to ensure that those held at the jail can learn about their rights as well as your services? This is this last bullet I really want to focus in on. It's very important that you not just hand your standard community informational brochure out to the facility. You really want to make one that's dedicated to those survivors that will be inside. For example, it will include, if you can set it up, the pound 63 number, or what to write on the outside of an envelope to make sure it's confidential if it's being sent from inside a jail. You really want to kind of make a brochure that is tailored to the jail and distribute that. And again, just some tips for getting started. You're going to want to begin your outreach. You're going to want to document that outreach. We find that it's useful when emailing someone in a correctional setting to be as to the point as possible. If it's a long email, it may not be read. You want to show them that you can kind of meet them where they're at in terms of that, for lack of a better word, military style prose or communication style. We are here to help you be in compliance with the PREA standards. We would welcome the chance to meet with you, period. Name, send. Just get that conversation going until you can establish that rapport. And again, just like Jana and Clarissa mentioned, if you're already working with NISDOCs, make sure you refer to that in your outreach. Acquaint yourself with the PREA standards. Make sure that they understand that you are expert in them and that you are in a unique position to help them be PREA compliant, because they have to have an MOU with you. So now it comes time to who do you want in these initial conversations? You're going to want to include the sheriff, the jail administrator, or their designee. Every facility must have a PREA compliance manager. You're also going to want to kind of make it multidisciplinary. And again, this may not be the first meeting, but it's good to kind of get a multidisciplinary meeting on the calendar happening quarterly or twice a year at minimum. Kind of make sure that you're all on the same page about the role you play and that services are going forward and that access is being provided. You'll also want to include on the rape crisis side, some of your leadership team in early meetings, as well as SART coordinators, managers, and victim advocates who will be doing the work. You can also reach out to Ms. Casa, tremendous coalition, has a lot of experience thinking about these issues. In those first discussions, you're going to talk about what each person brings to the table, their responsibilities, make sure that they understand your protocols, as Jana and Clarissa mentioned, about staying in your lane when it comes to phone calls, when do you terminate a call, talk about the training you provide internally to make sure that those boundaries are always respected. Make sure that they know that you are sharing their goal of keeping their facilities safe and eliminating sexual abuse in detention, and determine how they're going to coordinate access to your services. That can be through, obviously a multiple avenue approach. It can be direct outreach from the survivor via the inmate phones. It can be referrals from mental health. It can be any number of ways to kind of connect the dots there. Then you'll want to establish regular meetings, methods of communication, draft that memorandum of understanding, make sure that that confidentiality is kind of understood to be a part of that. Although it is not required by the PREA standards, you can offer to do cross-training, perhaps on trauma and a trauma-informed approach, something that you are expert in. and you can offer that out to the jail staff. And you're going to want to make sure that you're also bringing the hospitals and the staff there into the conversation so that they're very clear about how this will go when you are providing forensic exam accompaniment. I mentioned here, just document your outreach. You know, it's good because if you ever get a PREA auditor calling you, asking if you are engaged with your jail and you're not because they aren't reaching out to you or they won't partner with you, you can let them know, yeah, we've emailed them 3 times in May, haven't heard anything back. Jails and prisons need to be held accountable by responsible PREA auditors in order to kind of make sure that they are safer environments for folks to be held in. It's very important to get in there on the ground, request a tour. You can, during the tour, you can see if there's a good site, a good room to meet confidentially with clients, either during monthly office hours or weekly office hours. And when you hire new staff, make sure that they're offered the chance to tour the jail as well. These are the handouts that I mentioned. They're going to have a lot of kind of ideas about how to kind of maximize your engagement with your local jail and making sure that that you're, sorry, I'm blanking a little bit, making sure that you're really ready, that you understand which populations of people are often the most targeted for abuse when inside. And these documents were created for a project we're doing with the state prison system here in California. But I want to make sure you all know that even though these are California documents, the PREA standards are national standards. There's a lot of terrific information, as well as checklists about what to bring for your tour, what to wear, what to see, who to meet, what to ask. We really created this with an eye towards making sure that you were getting the maximum benefit out of that initial tour. And with that, I think it would be really good if we kind of had a little time for some questions. I see that there are some that have come up here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to start my video. And we're back now with Yana and Clarissa. I see a question here about retaliation. Do you often see retaliation between survivors and abusers in jails and prisons after you make a report on their behalf? And how do you advise survivors about that? Is there any kind of cautionary language that you give, or I guess, yeah, can we dig into that a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. So that is always a possibility. And before submitting a report, that is something that I always let our clients know that it can happen and kind of to expect it to happen. Not to steer away from having them make that report, but just for them to balance the pros and cons to making the report and then have them make their own decision as to if they want to continue with it or just kind of put it on the back burner. But before submitting a report, I think it's important for everyone to make sure that they let their clients know that it is a possibility and that a big possibility of it happening, whether that be retaliation from some other incarcerated people or whether that be from staff or officers in the facility.
Yeah, that makes sense. That is a dynamic, and that was a really excellent question.
Yeah. And we do a lot of safety planning too. Even like typically, Yana would do a lot of safety planning after an incident has happened, but particularly when talking about retaliation, we kind of already do the safety planning in advance so that they're in the same page in regards to like how you're going to connect with me if you want to talk to me or vice versa. So that's something that we constantly have to change around and work around their safety at all times.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do see another question here. Most prison and jail calls are collect calls, which can be very expensive. Is that the case for calls to your agency? And how do you pay for those, if so?
Our calls are free and confidential. That's one of the big things that we, when we promote our helpline, to let our clients know that it is free. I think Clarissa could dig a little bit more on how that happened, but yeah.
Yeah, so part of the MOU establishment was going back and forth about this. Like we said, with docs, with New York State docs, that was already, you know, they press pound 77 and they get connected to us. So docs pays for those calls. And when we were having conversations with the county jail, we kind of said we wanted to replicate that so that people didn't have to go into their books to kind of get access to us or spend their money. And so that was an easy kind of sell. There was no barriers to that. The only thing was, and this doesn't really happen, Yana. I don't think it happens in the county facilities, maybe in the state facilities where somebody might not want to dial pound 77 and connect directly with us. They can add our number to their like phone list. And then in that case, they do have to use their own money. But at this current moment, it's very important that we just have that communication with the county jail to let them know that if we can establish a particular number so that it's free access to people, that was, you know, something we just replicated from working with the state facilities.
Good. Again, kind of using that as a template for your work at the local level. And it's interesting how you would think, you know, the old wisdom is that you kind of start local and then you expand, you know, to to the state. But really, we are seeing that dynamic a lot because the state prisons have more. There's more pressure on them to be compliant. Those relationships are happening first, and they can inform the more local relationships. We just have a very short amount of time left for a question. I see one more question here. What are the greatest barriers to providing services to survivors in jails? Clarissa and Yana, can you briefly, kind of quickly speak to that?
So there are going to be a lot of barriers when providing these services, especially when you compare it to some of the services that you may provide to a community client. I would say the biggest barrier is probably just communication in general. Our clients are incarcerated. Their every move and every access of the communication that they may have is monitored and regulated and limited. So that is definitely, communication is definitely a barrier. Another one I would say is just in general, as advocates, we want to do so much for our clients. We want to fight for them. We want to make sure that they receive the best care and the best services, and that their reports are taken seriously every single time. However, when working with the incarcerated population, you kind of learn that that's not always the case. We may want our clients to have their reports investigated all the way and see their perpetrators being arrested and going to trial and everything, but most of the time it kind of just ends there. I think through this work, we've kind of learned that the most important thing may not be trying to get that person, the perpetrator charged or in court or anything, but the most important thing is just making sure that our clients are safe. So I'll say that's probably two of the biggest barriers that I see when working with this population.
Yeah, and I would add to that that the other barrier that we experience often too is that we don't speak the same language as the systems in place. So finding that common ground, you know, it took us over a year to get the MOU started, but that was partially because we were not talking the same language. We were trying to say the same thing, but not speaking the same language. And then also just being okay with changes constantly. You know, we might set something in place and in theory, the practice is great. And then when you actually put it into practice, it doesn't work out. So you have to kind of reevaluate that particular service or that particular outreach. So it's continuously changing. I think in the last 2 years, we've made significant changes to how we provide services. And that can sometimes be a barrier because you're used to something working a certain way and you have to kind of adapt consistently.
Yeah, that makes sense. We received a question about half an hour ago, and I'm sorry I didn't notice it at that time. The question is, how do you go about reaching out to formerly incarcerated people, and what is the first thing you would say to them? I think a lot of this just has to do with your messaging, making sure that all of your kind of public-facing materials are as inclusive as possible. And really, if you want to serve this population as you should, just mention that you're there and you can provide, advocacy, healing, emotional support to folks who are incarcerated as well as formerly incarcerated. Make sure that all your public-facing information is inviting in that way and inclusive. As to the first thing you would say to them, it really that really depends on the client, and you all know that the basics are, to validate and to believe. Yeah. Just a few more questions here, and we have gotten leave from E to kind of go a little bit late. I hope that's okay for everyone's day. I just see a few more questions that we want to address. What would you do if the client wants you to report, but the reporting sources are not helping clients and are actually causing more trauma to the client, such as OSI not answering or hanging up on them? So is that is that something you have to message about, or is there kind of a more forceful systems advocacy that we could envision in that case? Is this something
When things
that's
like that happen, I always recommend for people to kind of go to if you're able to, just go to the chief or the captain or whoever's above that person. Even if it has to reach, let's say, the superintendent of the facility or someone of higher power, I would say the best way to get your report taken serious or have them investigate it is to go, if one investigator doesn't do it, go to that investigator's supervisor or the person above them until you're able to get the services that your client provides and the investigation that they deserve.
Yeah, we actually do see this often, sadly, and this is where like the roles are very distinct. So Yana does the direct service and I do more of like the communication with the facilities. And so if during Yana speaking to me about some of the challenges that her clients might be experiencing, I might bring it up, or most of the time I do bring it up to my contacts and kind of address it in a very confidential space with giving non-identifying information. But if you all know, this work is very hard to be unidentifiable because everybody knows everyone. As long as you give a minimal description of the incident, you kind of know who the client is. And so we really address patterns. If we see that it's consistently the same potentially CEO or the same staff, we're going to bring it up to the chains to kind of get a response. And we have been successful at that. Typically, once I speak to somebody at the facility, they're very responsive. But it is something that we see as a challenge where they might not take them seriously. Sometimes our advocates call during, after our business hours, and we literally are like laughed at because they don't believe the report, or they make comments like, this person says the same thing all the time. So we're very dismissed, and we just have to continue to call and call.
Yeah.
I just want to add that it's also important. I just want to add that it's also important to have like your own advocate in the facility, someone who you can always turn to, and someone who's always gonna kind of be on your side and advocate for you and your client in the facility. Especially when it comes to just docs in general, they're very they trust each other a lot. If someone has a recommendation from an outside agency, they might not always take them as serious as someone from their own. So I would suggest it's always a good idea to kind of have that point of contact person, whether that be the PREA manager or the PREA deputy who is well versed in the services that you provide and can really advocate for you and your client and the reporting and everything in the facility.
Thank you, Yana. Just a couple more questions here. What makes a jail able to guarantee that helpline calls are confidential? How do they decide what they record or monitor? I'll take a stab just quickly. I'll say that jails can't really guarantee that folks are not going to overhear what people say on the phone. So the best they can do is kind of go through their phone service, whether it's GTEL or some other phone service, and make sure that the numbers are unblocked and non-recorded and confidential. And again, like, you can't always have non-recorded calls, as Yana and Clarissa mentioned, but you can make sure that folks know the extent to which calls are recorded, and that way they're not sharing things that they don't want to be later disclosed. As for what they decide to monitor or record, I think the answer depends on the situation, unfortunately. Like I say, in California, we have knowledge of folks observing a certain client picking up the phone and then going to another office, picking up the line and eavesdropping. I think it really has to do with the overall commitment of the facility to enabling these confidential services. One thing we can always remind them is that when confidentiality is respected and assured, you do wind up having more reports. It does not chill information. It actually creates more of a flow of information to the facility so that they can investigate abuse. Yana and Clarissa, did you have anything you wanted to add to that answer?
We also use like safe words, you know, if a client, because sometimes when it's legal calls, we can't see what's happening, only they can see what's going on. So if they ever feel uncomfortable, there's like a safe word that they say, we know that that means we have to hang up the phone, no questions asked, we don't do anything about it. Also being very aware, like having that sixth sense, like if you're hearing something in the background and your gut is telling you that there's something not right with the way that your client is responding to your questions, because even though the client might not use a safe word, you can kind of feel the vibe of a client that's uncomfortable or not being the same as they've been in the past. So you would be able to just use your judgment, follow your gut and just say, hey, we're going to end the call now. And that's fine. I mean, Yana probably has more direct experiences with that, but that's something that we do put in practice just for safety all around.
Okay. All right, we have one final question. I wish we could do more. We have one final question. Have you received, Clarissa and Yana, pushback from jail staff about providing services or how you provide services, and how do you address that pushback? If you could just give us 2 minutes to answer that, and thank you all for the terrific questions.
So we definitely have received pushback, as we explained earlier. We would have liked to provide emotional support and short-term counseling services to our clients at the county jail. However, when speaking to the Office of Mental Health, they kind of suggested that it wouldn't be the best idea, and we then agreed that they definitely know best since it's their area. But we've definitely received pushback when it comes to that. And then when it just comes to providing services, we haven't really received pushback, but the facility has kind of assigned us a place or assigned us a certain protocol to provide the legal calls or the legal visits. And we just make suggestions to let them know that maybe this isn't the best idea. Maybe this isn't the best place to have the legal calls or the legal visits. So we've been fortunate enough that the facility really trusts our expertise and really follows our direction. When we say that something's not going to work for us, they really go above and beyond to make it so that we're comfortable and our clients are comfortable as well. But I think it's important to just always speak up if something's not working, because at the end of the day, the most important thing is providing services to our clients, and we would never want to put their safety and in jeopardy or make them feel uncomfortable when receiving services from us.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that's a really wonderful way to kind of end, and it speaks to just the wonderful program and partnership you've established over there at Westcott. So thank you both for being part of today and sharing all you know with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you all.
Yeah, of course. And we want to end just with coming back to Frank, who says, if I had had an advocate, again, this just stresses the importance of what you all can provide. If I had had an advocate, it would have saved me so much grief. It would have helped me through that traumatic event immensely. Going through it alone, I didn't know who I could trust, who I could talk to about it, which appeared to be nobody. Thank you all very much. And I'll, you can come back and close us out.